Okay.
Hey, hello everyone. Thanks so much for being here. It seems like a few are still connecting to audio and so on, coming in through the waiting room. Oh, perfect.
Oh, so these
That's the
are
whole group.
our students in LA, and together with Mike Everts, their professor, their studio professor, they're actually in their field trip right now. And can we also ask Cole and Morgan to turn on their camera? I think they're still connecting.
Mike and everyone in LA, can you guys hear us?
Yeah. Okay.
It's nice. 10 for 1. 10.
Yeah, perfect.
I hope LA is kind of warm right now.
Yeah.
Missing the frigid.
Osman is very warm right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like in the 40s today.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can start. I think we might wait until Morgan and Cole turn on their cameras, because they are our two students who are here today in school. Okay, yeah, let's start.
Okay, perfect. Hi, Cole. Great. Your audio is good over there?
Yeah, I'm all good. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Cole will be moderating our discussion after the lecture. And we're really happy to have all of our students joining from either campus or even from their field trip in LA. So thank you guys for making it into the Zoom meeting. And obviously, thank you so much, Lexi and Tal, for joining us from New York for this lecture. We're like super excited to hear your perspective and what you have to say in a couple minutes. And of course, to everyone else who is slowly filtering in, who's joining either from MSU and forming part of our community here, and even from further abroad, like Frank, who's joining from Berlin, and a few other friendly faces who are connecting from Europe, where it's already quite late. But I think it's really nice to acknowledge that we kind of form a global community in a way, where we have the opportunity to hold these conversations that seem to be very important and urgent in the present day, to be talking about how emerging practices are engaging with this idea of thinking and building, or building and thinking, as two inextricable forms of being as architects in the world, as operating in the present day. And so we're super delighted to have you all here for the second iteration of Young Prototypes.
And we want to welcome, we're super excited to have Soft Firm joining us as our lecturers today. And I'll read a little bit about our guests, Lexi Xian and Tal Liu, who run Soft Firm, an interdisciplinary practice, which they define it as a flexible platform of which to expand design hunches into architectural ideas, spaces, and artifacts, a definition that I really love. They are based in New York City, and they have also taught, so they have a parallel kind of presence in academia. They've taught at Columbia, GSAPP, at Yale, RISD, Parsons, the Cooper Union, and most recently in Syracuse, where we met Lexi. She was the visiting critic there last semester, running a super cool studio, looking at possibilities for the area around the Everson Museum. And I just want to welcome you. I'm super excited. I'm a really huge fan of your work. thanks for participating in this series of talks, and we're thrilled to have you here. So now I can leave it to you from here. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. I'll share
Thank you.
my screen. Can you guys all see that? Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for inviting us. I'm a major fan of your guys' work too, and Frank's work, and just so the students know, we all used to work for Frank. Everybody used to work for Frank. So it was cool to make that connection first of all, but also to really resonate with your guys' work. And I'm really excited about this series and the question you are kind of posing. So we called this lecture Rough Proof, and we really like rough proof as a term because it's the printer's proof that's made really quickly by hand without the use of any kind of special tools or positioning in printmaking. I used to do printmaking before I did architecture, and also the idea of proof as a logical set of ideas or kind of a dynamic sequence of things that you work through that aren't necessarily linear, but that you can test in different ways with different approaches. And I think that really reflects our practice. This is us kind of mocking up a public installation in a barn. This was a year ago, and it was like frigid cold, and we had some problems with the car too. It was an adventure. So the prototype in and of itself isn't always kind of a elegant thing. It can also just be as dumb as making Tal hold up a scrim and pointing a projector at her. So, and I think that this is a good way to kind of set up like the way that our office was founded. Somebody asked us what our firm name was, and we were like firm. And then one of us said soft, and then we were like soft firm. And we like it because it reminds everybody of tofu and mattresses. And we really like the confusion of also challenging like the self-seriousness of architects, but also really thinking about us being between two places.
Yeah, so this is us. We became friends the summer before grad school a long time ago, and we've kind of been collaborating and working together ever since. We're both anthropologists and artists by trade. And we take an ethnographic approach to sites. I think that comes a lot from, how we grew up, where we're from. We're both American-born Chinese. I'm from Hong Kong and Honolulu, and Lexi's from California. So we take a both and approach to culture.
And the firm is, as we said, kind of like a platform. So we think of it like an oxymoron, a gradient, or a spectrum. So that logic of kind of being somewhere in between lo-fi and hi-fi and environments, buildings, cultures, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. But also like, we've worked for firms before, and in starting your own firm, you're really prototyping the things that you've learned, but also kind of the blank slate, which is where you can really like kind of build things up. I think that also starting with some of our observations of culture and some of the images that we have made or gifts that we've made have been really about observing spatial codes and how culture is kind of shaped by that. So these are kind of images of public seating in China and Chinatowns. And we really like the lo-fi plastic stool as it's kind of stackable, lightweight, but can also redefine a space really quickly. So it begs the question of what are the tools for the public and tools for the common, and what are the everyday for others? And we also really like the aesthetics of Chinatown, like the graphic collapse that happens when you take the inside of a store and bring it out to the street front, and kind of the wacky weirdness and thriftiness that makes a garbage can into a card table, and the improvisational nature of the kind of public space. And this has helped us kind of challenge the boundaries of the firm itself. So we've worked a lot with Flora Studio, which is based in Buenos Aires, and we kind of have a dialogue with them about Chinatown. We call them ourselves Chinatown pen pals. And also Linda Jiang, we've talked with her some about kind of Toronto and Chinatown. And this also extends to kind of the Rolodex we've built up of fabricators, and a lot of them are in Chinatown as well. Just to kind of speak a little bit about prototyping through teaching. This was a seminar that I taught at Columbia that was really about, kind of urban objects and how those could be transformed by the public. So a newsstand could be transformed into kind of a community gathering space or farm stand. And then also thinking about representing communities that are not seen as canonical within the architectural discipline. And as Pablo mentioned, last semester, I taught emergent publics, and this was about the community plaza at the Everson Museum of Art. And this plaza is right in front of an IMK building. And in working kind of with 13 students, we really thought about a different way of designing. And in that way, we were kind of asking the museum to give us the program and to shape that program. And the plaza is really just kind of like a flat concrete pad. And as the Syracuse really rethinks its downtown area and rethinks urban renewal, it's an opportunity for us to kind of think about how the plaza could be reshaped, but also how kind of like the way of thinking and building with students could be really different. So instead of a kind of hierarchical Beaux-Arts model, we really thought about a distributed model where there were different nodes of teams, and those teams would kind of mix and trade and kind of borrow each other's ideas. So in that, there's kind of an embedded idea of public within that and kind of the possibilities of what those things can be. And one of the projects literally used scaffolding to think about kind of the potential of the plaza throughout the seasons. So, and so rough proof for practice and architectural practice can be a loose platform of people and ideas. It can come from a personal place of working, thinking, and making.
Kind of translating the ideas that we have looked at through both research and through teaching into our projects for public space. Starting with this is the first page of our competition for the 13th annual Love in Times Square competition, going from kind of our main constructed image or rendering to the installation in real life a few months later. It was a crazy quick process. But we submitted our proposal during pre-coronavirus, kind of February 2021, when Times Square was completely desolate. We were also kind of struggling with or thinking about the reckoning with George Floyd protests and thinking about public space and streets as being a site of protest. So the directive of the 2021 competition was to use recycled plywood barricades from empty storefronts. So the core of our design proposal was really thinking about how to use plywood as a canvas to communicate love in the time of COVID. So again, thinking about kind of cues from the urban context and pulling together different kinds of communities, we really looked at iconic structures on the site. So looking at the TKTS booth and a couple of monuments that are on site, and looking at kind of what makes Times Square, which is the billboards and kind of the history of people who have gone through there. And then looking at kind of how our installation is situated so that it stitches all those things together, and also thinking about the site as a crossroads between 7th Avenue and Broadway. So the main partie of our site, we're looking at hearts, incorporating kind of iconography, given that the competition is Valentine's themed. But rather than thinking about a hermetic shape, thinking about it as an unrolled line, kind of a delaminated line to create different spaces. So we created 4 antechambers: the soapbox, love seat, chapel, and the wishing well, also, which is sort of the dimensions of which were defined by the 6-foot social distancing bubble, and also making sure that there was, enough space and access for ADA. So this is our storefront, our installation unrolled. We alternated plywood and dichroic film, kind of thinking about this as being a storefront that reflects both sort of the lights and the billboards of Times Square and also the people passing by. And always thinking about how to layer on meaning and public engagement. We are inspired by the 9/11 memorial in the West Village, love locks on the Seine, and prayer trees or wishing trees. So we fixed a safety net, a literal safety net underneath the kind of storefront structure to allow people to tie ribbons, love letters, mementos, locks, sort of as a way to really engage and layer meaning, personal meaning onto the structure. So we hope that each visitor would be an author of installation and provide moments of reflection, kind of voyeurism between windows, and create a collective armature and just create a beacon of solidarity. So this kind of over time, it really did take on a life of its own. It became a site of protest, a site of performance, dance, and kind of a collector for all of the quirky characters of Times Square. And it really did sort of take on a life of its own. Became over time, it became this woolly mammoth of ribbons that reflected both kind of the intent and letters and messages from people all around the world, as well as reflected kind of all the constant 24/7 lights and electricity of Times Square. So this was another public installation that we did in downtown Brooklyn called Drive Through. Their kind of prompt was for us to use light as a way to pull people in to create a beacon in the plaza. So we really were looking at how a screen and a simple light structure and playing with shadows, cast, and projection and scrim could act as an urban lantern. And very much saw the site as kind of a constellation of urban objects and institutions. So looking at kind of BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, Mark Morris Dance Center, and Mosque, which were really sort of anchors of the community. And drawing in language of scaffolding and the car-dominated thoroughfare to create like a literal or figurative drive-through or reinterpret drive-through. So it was a rotating structure that had different configurations. So to set up for watching a movie or performance or create an outdoor living room, which was direct kind of lineage from our studies of Chinatown. But an invisible part of this installation was kind of the process of curating with the client and with stakeholders in the community. So we set up an open call to artists in the area to pull in documentarians, video art, kind of play throughout the year, throughout the 2 months that we were there, which was Black History Month and Women's History Month. So it was really important, and also to provide activations around community stakeholders. So it was really important to provide an infrastructure or toolkit for our clients to use and adapt. So this is a few clips of it in use, in action, which was animated both through projection, but also by the public. And then just a few photos of it. It ended up looking a lot, thanks to our collaboration with our fabricators, looked a lot like the model that we made and also really blended into the context of the site. So we really loved that it was an installation that was lo-fi, simple, and generous. So rough proof for the public, interventions in the public site can index time and civic participation. They can compute notions and blur boundaries of individual ownership and property. Multiplying urban rooms, platform stages can allow new publics to emerge. We see these interventions as tools for the community and client architecture without a capital A.
And now talking about rough proof for living. During COVID, we had all of our students draw their design studios, which were really their bedrooms, and thought about how we could re-inhabit the glass house. So kind of thinking about how the kind of mess of everyday life could also be re-inhabited within this canonical piece of architecture. So everyone kind of living their everyday lives within this space. And in another proposal, we looked at the representation of property within architecture and not just selling space, but also selling lifestyles of kind of consumerist culture. And we wanted to kind of mess up that perfect kind of notion of owning a unit. And in a lot of ways, the plan is an organizer in architecture, but as soon as we actually live in it, it almost loses its potency. And we're trying to fit and kind of all of our lives into these units. And so in this way, we wanted to celebrate the cat lady hoarder, the finance bro, the retired couple, and kind of think about how they would live differently. We also were thinking about kind of economic models, and this is affordable housing in Chinatown that is in a really rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. So we proposed that there would be a roof garden where residents could grow their own plants, but then also sell those plants to hipsters on the street level. So yeah, just kind of thinking a little bit more about how imaging and kind of imagination, thinking and building can really kind of come together. And I think this also came together in Generation House. This is a project that's really about adaptive reuse and intersectional living. So it was meant to house an elderly couple on the garden level and a family on the upper duplex. And then our architecture firm is on one floor. So this is the plan. And then we really thought about these kind of apple cores that could like kind of be stuffed with services, like bathrooms and closets, but also how those kind of closets could become thresholds that could allow for you to kind of open up the entire floor. So we were really inspired by Lion Witch and the Wardrobe and 2001 Space Odyssey, and also kind of thought about how these insertions in the apple core would allow us to allow the residents to be able to adapt over time. So this is like a movable armoire on the left, and there's kind of like a hidden secret bathroom on the right. So just going to kind of cycle through some more images, but also I guess the interesting thing about like kind of, we're prototyping our own workspace in terms of almost it being within a living space. And also, I mean, I guess Tal's in this space right now, and I'm in this space right now. Usually we work on the same floor and next to each other, not on separate floors. But I think that it was interesting to be kind of designing the house and working on the imaging and representation of the house by like literally taking photos of it as we were in it and modeling it while we were in it. And another thing that we did was kind of take scrap and make tables out of them that could also be reconfigured, but also thinking about our buildings as things that are, changing constantly, like they're decaying over time, all the time, and how you can kind of accept that and really think about how insertions that are quite careful can really enhance the space. We reuse some skylight film from dichroic film from Times Square, and literally these are just kind of like, we see a scrap and we think about whether that can be reused in a different way. And I think it was a really nice play on a skylight from 1899 and to becoming something quite different. And I think that that's where like kind of the Rhino model breaks down, where there's like you could have an idea about construction, but when you actually get to like a site that's from 1899, nothing's plumb, and you have to kind of figure it out with the contractor. But a lot of other things that we picked up, like the kind of old bathroom and making it into a reading nook, and kind of some of the spaces. I'll just cycle through. And yeah, I think that a lot of our kind of prototyping is also just through taking iPhone photos, to be quite honest, and thinking about how those kind of inform a way of image making and representing our architecture. So yeah, so living is not unlike gardening. It like needs constant tending and maintenance. And in that way, this house has become like a place for people who teach together, people who work together, friends, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been really interesting in terms of how like a building can also house a community in itself. And then this is also a multi-generational renovation that we did on the Upper West Side. And this was thinking about communalkas, which were like a way for lots of families to live together in Russia. We were just really inspired by the kind of color palette, and also just like the reality of one of our clients having lived there since he was a baby, and now having, grandkids in the house as well. So we really thought about kind of like materiality, but also thinking about kind of the archway that we could skew and flatten, and like a play on materiality. We call this like our Pee Wee Herman kitchen that we really like. And so we also like the idea of kind of making like our buildings look like drawings sometimes, and also thinking about how like a photograph of a real thing can look like it's almost like a fake Photoshop. So these are just some final images. So domestic strategies extend the territory of the everyday, modeling a way for things to be reused and used. Fashion per task, adapted and reordered. They are lightweight by nature. Domestic strategies empower us to adapt our environments over time to changing needs. They can be low tech, improvisational, and grafted onto a larger urban sphere.
we'll try to go through the rest of these slides pretty quick, but
Yeah,
looking
sorry.
at work, rough proof and work. This was a case in which I think our a project for a client actually became the seed for thinking and exhibition. So we were looking at a VR studio or an office for a VR studio. So we really were inspired by their kind of assembly line of capture, producing images and presenting them as a digital image in VR. So we broke that down into a tripartite assembly line where the physical body is captured, digitally processed, and becomes absorbed within the digital veil, which is what they call being in the camera. So we really kind of looked at that as a seed. So we looked at the phenomenon of VR sickness, where the eye is disconnected from the body, and speculating on using touch and physical surfaces to ground the body while you're in virtual reality. So that kind of was a platform for us to think about how tools of work are being broken down and integrated onto the body, how you can bring your office really anywhere where reality becomes bespoke, allowing the worker unlimited choice in their experience. And this was in like 2017, 2018. So in a similar line of thought, we started prototyping a phone booth for a co-working space. This was also 2018. That was spacious inside, but appeared kind of flat on the outside, along kind of in those same lines of creating things that look like two-dimensional drawings, which kind of right after the pandemic, we kind of thought about, speculated on what that would look like, sort of proliferated over an infinite field. So it's a unit of workspace where you don't need a collective office, but you're kind of in a cybernetic field or in a literal field. And kind of along and parallel tracks as we were doing this, we were also kind of cycling these thoughts from actual prototypes for clients into essays and also into this installation on the workplace, which was at ADO. We kind of started by tracking workplace objects and themes of work from 1950 to 2050, looking at how we vacillate between choice and control, from borough landschaft and early ideas of cybernetics, thinking about a landscape as an inspiration for how we organize ourselves in an office, to storage innovation, quote unquote, the file cabinet, and the invention of white collar work and all the paper that we now need or needed, and its corollary in the office building, to which was then and now, but now is a different era of the Googleplex, thinking about the future of work and the conceit of infinite play and choice in a large warehouse. So kind of the addition to, or the culmination of those, the explorations of work themes in history, we did a few kind of installations within the ADO workspace. So this is making a totem out of the water cooler, thinking about what are the physical things that we want to maintain or gravitate towards, or kind of keep alive in a synthetic way as we move into a increasingly virtual work environment. So this is a collective watering hole, or thinking about the supply closet as providing tactile pleasure in a digital world, or that kind of idea of like stealing office supplies. And then finally, an installation where you inhabit the desktop screensaver, where synthetic projections of nature are more accessible than actual nature. So this became kind of a sound bath room where we played the XP Windows original startup music, which I'm not sure if people now know what that is, but it became kind of a popular meditation, nap, and conference room for the members of ADO and also the staff. Yeah. So for working, we start at the scale of the body. Threshold objects allow for the staging of the body and subjective choice and freedom for the worker. We oscillate between a desire for privacy and openness every day for a worker. Culturally, in 10 to 20-year trends, a constant within work is a desire for self-determination. Spaces of work can be designed for qualitative choice, phases of the body, and for adaptive daily reuse.
Yeah, so I think that that's it. Yeah, we went through a lot of material, but I think that overall there's a lot of connections between the things that we are working on, and whether they're different kind of typologies or people all are always like, what kind of architecture do you do? And I think that it's all kind of within a continuum of prototyping in its own way. Yeah, rough prototypes. Okay, should I stop sharing? Yeah, thank you guys.
I would leave it on that slide. I love that slide.
Yeah, because I made it in Google Slides also. You were at the other lecture, or I made it like the I don't know, within the half hour before I gave a lecture, but yeah.
It's great.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry we went over our time.
No, it's
No, you're fine. Thank you.
Cole, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, first off, I just want to start by thanking you both for your time and knowledge today. We really appreciate you guys devoting this time and lecture to us. It was really educational, and I really appreciate it. I was just going to start by asking a question, but if anyone has questions after that, feel free just to use the raise hand icon in Zoom, and then we can bounce around. But just to start things off, I've really been interested in adaptive reuse recently. And so seeing your generational house project, I was curious on how you guys approach that in terms of preserving and honoring the past while also moving toward more current and contemporary use and function.
Yeah, I think that we weren't afraid of like the soft, firm quality of like the real contrast. And so it was kind of like what we needed to redo was pretty obvious in terms of bathrooms and kitchens. And I think that by really accepting the fact that we weren't trying to recreate something, we were trying to create really careful insertions that could be like the contrast was what was important to us, that one thing would look like it was a Donald Judd spaceship and everything else would look like it was highly filigreed and had a patina on it. So I think that it was our first real adaptive reuse project, but in that it became a really interesting prototype, not only for how we work with contractors, but also how we could test out a lot of different material questions we had. Like, could we like make a kitchen work from Bowery Restaurant Supply? Could we, like make our own tables? Could we figure out how a railing could be made out of mosquito net? So there was a lot of stuff in that I think that we kind of innovated with. Yeah, great question.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, that's something I've been kind of doing some research on. So yeah, those are definitely some great points there. And then another question I had was that you guys have a very developed and articulated theoretical direction that seems to guide the firm and work produced. I was just curious if you guys can trace back kind of how you decided upon that direction, and if you kind of anticipate that altering at all in the future.
Well, thanks, because that's a huge compliment. I don't think that we think of ourselves as having a highly articulate I think that it comes through the presentation where you kind of wrap it all up, and the process of it is more messy. Tao, jump in, help me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that along the lines of prototype, it's a lot of revisiting, kind of starting from one place and building a framework and then revisiting it and kind of applying all of our projects within that framework and seeing sometimes it fits, sometimes it doesn't fit. But yeah, it's honing over many, many years of working together.
And hopefully it changes. I mean, I think that like there are themes that we seem to be kind of interested in circling around, but I hope that they change. Like, I definitely want it to continue to evolve.
I think our means change a lot, the way that we've worked together and the way that we approach different projects and different clients. But I think fundamentally we connected for a reason. I think we both came from an anthropology background, so we have those same values. And kind of no matter what project we work in, I think we we do have that ethnographic approach, or that like approach where you interview clients, and a lot of this kind of the development of the story comes through a conversation.
Yeah, I had a, by the way, I had a question along those lines, because I think that Cole is right in a way that there is this incredible clarity in what you are doing and how you want to do it. It's not easy to resist private clients and a certain kind of commercial work. I think where you are kind of staking yourselves is in the public realm and in a kind of cultural project that is significant and consistent. And so I guess my question was kind of along the lines of how do you manage that conversation? How do you educate your clients and the people you work with on the values of flexibility, adaptability, you know, the improvisational value of your work?
I think some of that comes with, I mean, also as the prompt for your studio or your series is about creating a manifesto and setting up your values. I mean, we do have to take those projects to make money, but we do also try to make sure that we create space for kind of installation work and some of the research work as well. But in terms of even within some of those projects where we have a little bit more flexibility, or we try to convince the client of flexibility, it is a process, it is a conversation, and sometimes like the client is completely surprised. So like, for example, with the downtown Brooklyn installation, they had no idea that that open call for artists' work, like that was something they had never done before. It actually something that we had never done before. It was just like an idea that we had, and it was kind of realized through prototyping and through iterating and like sort of making our way through it. But Lexi in particular is really good about sticking to her values and making the thing happen. So
I'll pay you later for saying that. Thanks.
Looked like someone in Mike's studio maybe had a question you guys want to ask.
So can you guys hear me? Yes. All right, cool. So basically speaking, like with like in terms of clients, like all this work is like super exciting and really interesting to see and like how you guys think about it, which I could see like certain clients being kind of hesitant towards that. So you've kind of touched upon like how you talk with them once you have them, but how do you get the clients initially? Like do you like aim for some like a certain like area where people would like focus towards this, like what you guys are doing, or like what is the process of getting a client?
I think that we've been really, really lucky, and we've shown more of the projects where we were invited to do things, like the public projects where they were open competitions. And we definitely have done like a dance studio. We did like kind of like there was a Buddhist nonprofit that also asked us to work on some things. So we've had like and we've also worked on like luxury residential in the West Village too. So I think that the clients right now, like we are our biz dev department, like Tal and me. And so in that way, the way that we kind of find the clients is that it's through people that we know, or it's like somebody hears of us, or somebody like is interested in our work and self-selects in that way. And I think that, I mean, luckily we're kind of coming to a time when thinking about like, you know, the cultural project is something that clients really do value, and we value that in our clients. So I think that not every project is adaptive reuse, and not every project is flexible in that way. But I think that we still have a graphic way of approaching what those things are. And most of our clients want to work with us for that reason. And I think some of it also just has to do with craftsmanship, and the people that we really try to fabricate with are people that we trust and have developed a relationship with over time.
yeah, we definitely have a highly relational approach. And these are, you know, things that we've learned over projects that haven't gone so well. You know, we kind of get a sense, having worked together for so many years, we kind of get a sense of the kind of client relationship that we want, and also the team of contractors and fabricators that we work with. We know, well, we're getting a sense of how much is predetermined, how much space we have to really kind of move through the process as well.
But I think in the beginning, like the first idea of like doing a VR studio for these young people who are still in, their second stage of venture capital funding, it was like, coming up with ideas for their brand. And I think that, in some ways working with that kind of tenable startup, was less sustainable for us in the long term, but it was just the beginning. And that idea kind of helped us write the essay about work, which somebody read and then invited us to an exhibition, which I think goes back to this web of kind of the way that, thinking leads to building and building leads to thinking. And it keeps doing that for us. And so, yeah, we're lucky in that way.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting. Thank you. Any other questions?
Then I can jump in. I had some things that I wanted to, maybe more as a comment, but maybe we can also take it as a question. But I think I love to see your work, and it's like super exciting, and it makes me think, about going back home and starting to prototype in many different ways, right? Which is something that relates to this class. And to see your work through prototyping today was really inspiring, I think. And I think for students, it should also kind of like make them understand that prototyping is a very polysemic thing, right? That already we've had 2 lectures, and we're already starting to see very different approaches to what prototyping means, right? Depending on how you work. It can be everything from like misreadings, right, between the digital and the built work, or what you do with iPhone photographs, translation from a model to a real built project one-to-one, and how incredible that can be and how powerful that can be, and also just like doing it in the present tense, right? Doing it as you're working, even from transforming public space through a prototype to transforming your everyday space at home, right? So I just think for kind of like for what we're interested in as a discussion in this class, it's also like really fresh and inspiring to see how you've approached your own work and how you talk about your own work, right? And also, I mean, of course, the question of the representation, I know it would come up, right? And there's a clear intentionality behind how you represent, right? And I also, of course, I've said it before, I'm a big fan of this kind of lo-fi off-the-shelf representation that translates into the built work. So all of these things, I think, gives a lot of food for thought for students, and I hope it also kind of makes them, gives them things that they can resonate with as we progress in the semester. So thanks. Long comment.
Not a question, yeah, but I liked it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us.
Hey, Lexi, I mean, it's great to see your work, and particularly after the time you spent with us in Berlin and this new partnership with Tao. I guess I just had one kind of comment question. I mean, I think you've set up you guys have set up a number of strategies and sort of, launching the practice, and also the idea of a kind of evolution of the practice with certain representational strategies, as you say, very graphic, certain ideas about appropriation, scale of work. I guess I'm just still curious, like as your practice does evolve, how do you imagine this sort of approach in response to scale, like as you scale up in terms of complexity of buildings, or say ground up building scale, urban scale? Is it scalable, or in a way, are you sort of more, in a way, at ease working at this scale of work in the future?
I think that we're both scaling up, and I guess I mean, Tal's working on an edition in Washington, and I'm working on an edition upstate, and those are on a bigger scale of building form, kind of adaptive reuse projects. So they're kind of parasites that, or like, you know, another appendage that kind of goes onto an existing building. And then I think that the work on the plaza, I mean, it was really interesting to have like, you know, a potential client that was also the studio brief. And I think that in terms of moving into a public plaza and actually designing public space, that's something that I think that graphic appropriation and like reusability is definitely feels like it's the right thing, you know? So I think the scalability is there, but I also think that there's, you know, in terms of the public installations, we also really love building form and thinking about kind of shapes, geometry, and just as like hardcore design as well. So I feel like we want to do it, you know, we want to scale these things. And I think that I think the question is like a good one, because like we're going to have to adapt how that scales. And that's where the design kind of comes in as well. And I don't think that the graphic nature of our work is like it isn't totally a conceit. I feel like we also don't really love to render, and that's just not really how we like kind of test our images. And so for that reason, and maybe because like, you know, we never really learned how to be very good at it. And I think that for that reason, it's like the shortcuts that also feel very, very kind of true to like the way that we kind of operate in life, as maybe, you know, with some Chinese roots that are like, you know, it doesn't have to be fancy. It's just about the kind of making it happen, you know? And so I think that, yeah, that part, I think when it gets to be like a, you know, if we worked on Estrel, for example, you know, like on a huge, like, I think we wouldn't be able to do that overnight, obviously, but yeah, I'm excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, no, I think for us, the collage is a representation, but it's also a process. So in terms of like an urban scale or larger projects, it's, you know, collaging is a metaphor for a program. And I think in that way, a lot of the form that we have sort of thought through and generated tends to be a foil for the context. So yeah, I don't know what that looks like when we do a luxury condo, but I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I think, we are kind of, I mean, it's interesting because soft firm sometimes acts like a shell company. Like we, you know, we don't work on every project together. We also have different interests. And I mean, Tal's also really interested in affordable housing in Hawaii and Honolulu. And so I think there are a lot of, you know, it would be really interesting to work on a different scale in that way. So yeah, it's kind of an open field right now, but I think that some of our leads, like we're starting to slowly kind of scale up in what we're working on.
Edgar isn't here with us today, but I think that there's something so relevant about what you just said that was brought up last week, and it was his use of the word translation, that between one medium of architecture and the next, or architecture or otherwise, that is where the kind of project starts to clarify and come to light and produce something that is a learning for him as the designer of the process, so that the prototype in a way emerges from translating from like the graphic collage, let's say, into the built form, and then once more again into perhaps another medium altogether.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like I've had like spirited debates with Edgar about like the degree. I feel like you were there also. You guys were there also, where we were talking about like how many, like, I don't know, 1/64th should your AutoCAD be tuned to, so things are perfectly aligned. And you know, it's interesting to teach students and try to teach rigor, because I think that rigor is like the hardest thing to really enforce. And I think that it's interesting to think about how translation and prototype it's not neat, you know? And I think that there's a part of it where you have to throw it against the wall to see what sticks in order to yeah, to actually know, you know, and so in that way, there's a rigor to the kind of unrigorousness to it, which I think I really appreciate about the idea of what translation is, and also, you know, like rough prototype in terms of, you know, the first thing that you make before you try to perfect it. And I think that is a really good space for all the students to be thinking about within your manifestos, but also in terms of like kind of how do you create a practice that also has like a degree of being able to be messy and to being able to kind of experiment with things. Yeah.
The messiness is really the real field for prototyping, right? And then it's when process becomes really important, right? As you know, working through something that can be very rough or that can be very unrefined, but at the same time it's sophisticated, right? And that is something that kind of misreading is something that we like to instill or kind of like encourage students to do, right? That the final polished product is not really that relevant, right? And we should look beyond that. Even you were talking before about, you know, not rendering, maybe not only because you're not good at it, right? But as a form of resistance to all the implications in that form of representation, right? And how that scales to real life. But I think also, for example, the collage kind of has a really interesting and attractive translation to adaptive reuse, right? As a form of work and as an approach to architecture. Another thing that we think is a huge value that young architects have to think about, right? That the tabula rasa kind of approach, or the approach where the human scale or the human activity doesn't matter, is that, yeah, that kind of top down is something of the past, right? And the way in which we have to think now is much more about the collage, much more about the kind of palimpsest, right? The reinterpretation and the new layers that bring new significance to something that is already existing, right? And for example, the Brooklyn project for me is like really fascinating in that sense, right? Because it has it's just a rotating piece that completely changes the meaning of all of the space around it, right? As it moves, and it also projects the kind of value and the scale of your architecture to you know, something that we can't really measure in a plan, and of course we can't measure in a rendering. But I think all of these things are great kind of questions to foreground, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad you're recording, because you guys sometimes are talking about our work in ways that we need to bring back into our process. So yeah, but I highly encourage in that, which it makes me think about, like, you know, you create a manifesto for how you would work with a prototype, but like definitely draw like what you find out from that and then put back in. Like it would be really interesting to figure out how to kind of diagram your process of learning from the things that you look at and how it creates new outputs.
Yeah, so thanks so much. I mean, unless Cole has any other questions that he wrote down, or any other of our students in LA or of our guests, you can raise your hand now, or otherwise I think we can really thank Lexi and Tal for the presentation. I think we all really enjoyed to see your work. It was super helpful for, you know, the purpose of this elective, and we'll keep you posted with all the new interpretations of prototyping that come up in the coming weeks. But thank you so much. Thanks to all of you who have participated. Thanks, Cole, for moderating, and see you all next week.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll pop in on some of the other lectures for sure. I'd love
Great,
to.
we'd love to see you there. I can see
Yeah.
Andre Lusher was there. He'll be presenting in a couple of weeks.
Great. And Frank, keep in touch. Let's keep in touch.
We'll do. Yeah. Thanks so much, Lexi and Tal. Yeah. Fantastic talk.
Thank you
so
so much.
And good luck with your practice.
Yeah, thanks. You guys said. Okay.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.
Bye.